independent consultant. You can check out my blog, my website at roykin.ca, and I graduated from University of Toronto with a computer science degree. Okay, yeah, then anyone next can go.
Anyone next? Who is iPhone? You can introduce yourself.
Hi, this is Mohit.
Hi, Mohit.
Hello.
Hi,
Introduce
Mohit.
yourself and
So,
what you're looking for.
yeah, so I'm cloud admin in startup company, and I'm just taking a step forward in Azure. So I have no experience in Azure before. I just like giving my exams in AZ 900, AZ 103, and I'm just planning to learn Azure DevOps, and that's my plan, and that's why I'm looking forward to like learn new technology. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
No, I just want to mention, like, if someone can mute themselves, like I hear background noise if you're not speaking.
Don't worry, I'll mute them. So who is the next one? I see Koti Anushka. Can you please introduce yourself? Okay, I think we can go to the next person. Who is Fraz? Fraz1.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Fraz. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm sitting in Starbucks. You might hear a lot of music in the back. But yeah, I'm a sysadmin. I work at a company, a software company. We're responsible for hosting a lot of Microsoft Dynamics for a lot of customers out there in the market.
Okay, cool. And anybody else want to introduce themselves before Roy can begin his presentation?
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. My name is Francisco Villegas. I'm system engineer. I work in a telecom company, and I'm just want to know something deeper about the Azure Kubernetes.
Great. How about Leila?
I'm not sure her sound is working, but last time she couldn't say. Laila, can you speak? Is this your sound working? Can you introduce yourself? I don't think her sound is working.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, maybe you can.
Okay. I'll just start then. Okay. Welcome everybody. You know, I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak. You know, small and large. So I'll be talking about the Azure Kubernetes Service, just going over the fundamentals. You know, what would an AKS architecture would look like? What are the tools involved? How would you deploy? And then going a little bit deeper dive into security and networking. And then from a DevOps point of view, how do you kind of plan for it? So it's a lot. I'm going to do some very, very simple demos. But, you know, I don't mind questions. I encourage questions that are kind of, you know, aligned to this topic, right? And don't mind kind of a collaborative discussion, right? So, you know, we're all here to kind of share and learn, okay? So, okay, that's great. So I just want to start off with containerized applications, okay? And so I'm not going to talk about Docker or what containerized applications is, okay? But I'll just assume that you kind of have a basic idea, you know. So here is an example, just to start off, of a containerized application, okay? And basically, you know, adhering to a Microsoft services architecture, you know, you have you know, a bunch of kind of like components in this application, kind of split up into kind of more microservices, right? So, you know, you have like the front end, you know, a web app, and you can have a microservice that is just about identity management, like a shopping cart, basket, ordering, all that stuff, right? And I'll go into kind of how that plays into Kubernetes, but um, you know, in this case, this makes for a very compelling and distributed kind of application, right? Um, so this is what a typical or like a microservices architecture containerized application looks like. Okay, so uh, you know, so let's just go into kind of like what is Azure Kubernetes Service. Actually, let's swap. So what is Azure Kubernetes Service? So it's really a managed container orchestration service, right, based on Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is open source, kind of created by Google, from what I hear, and it's been open sourced. And really, what Azure Kubernetes, I'll call it AKS, what it does is it makes it more of a managed, like a bit more of a platform as a service, right? We don't have to manage the infrastructure for the systems and for a Kubernetes kind of deployment, right? So it's a managed container orchestration, um, and it helps manage container-based applications, helping them figure out its networking and storage components, just like we saw in the previous slide on a microservices architecture. Um, and really what AKS provides is that you don't have to like worry about underlying infrastructure components like VMs, like there's something called a master node and worker nodes or node pool. Like, you don't have to worry about that too much, like because it's a managed service. um, the AKS, like the service, will manage some of that stuff, right? So that you can focus on, as a developer, just the application itself, like building it, deploying it, testing it, managing it in that environment. Okay. Next is kind of build and run portable microservice-based applications, right? So you get that, because it's containerized, you get that portable moving containers in between clusters, AKS clusters, or even different platforms like even AWS and Azure. Provides a declarative approach to deployment. So it's really through what you call the YAML files, right? To deploy a certain application, containerized app, into the AKS. So I'll show this a little bit later, okay? It also helps with CI/CD kind of pipelines, which is the base, one of the core um, ingredients to a DevOps, to support a DevOps culture and process, right? The CI/CD pipelines. Okay, so from a simple architecture point of view, this is what kind of the AKS looks like. Okay, so really on the left side is more kind of a platform as a service, okay? Meaning you don't, like all this, the infrastructure, the VMs or whatever it is, it's all behind the scenes. It's all pretty much a black box, right? You don't really care. But the customer managed, this is where you actually deploy the applications, your containerized. So you have multiple nodes, and each node is essentially a virtual machine, okay? And you can have many containers in a node, um, and that run your application, right? And you can scale containers, copies of containers across different nodes. Okay, so this is what you see here: customer managed. At the end of the day, a node is really a VM, and so you have to kind of take care of it, patch it, and things like that. Where Azure managed, like there is a VM, but you don't really have to see it. So the importance of kind of the cluster master, it helps with scheduling. It's kind of like a sort of, yeah, like the orchestrator, right? It helps manage the cluster environments, right? It has a bunch of like services, right? The API server is basically, there's a CLI called Kubernetes CLI or kubectl, right? So when you want to say, get me the nodes or get me the pods or deploy this application, those instructions, those commands go through the API server, and then it goes through a scheduler that figures out which node or which pod to deploy to. So this is kind of where the heart of AKS cluster is. So there's it's kind of a master slave kind of a model. Okay, so that's what AKS. If in contrast, if you can deploy Kubernetes in a strict IaaS environment, right? So all VMs, but then this portion on the left, you have to definitely you have to manage that yourself, right? So it gives so AKS, it just makes it easier in a more simple fashion to have have your Kubernetes deployments. Okay. So here is another kind of slide just talking about it's kind of general art. So I mentioned here a node is a Azure virtual machine. Okay, you have something called Kuproxy, Kubelet. It helps kind of manage the inside and run the inside. And really, from a developer point of view, all you care about is deploying that your container, your Docker image into the pods, right, as containers, right? And the thing with AKS is that you can use other Azure services such as Azure Disk or Azure Files or Postgres databases, right, along with your AKS environment. And that goes the same thing with virtual networks. So the point of this slide is saying that AKS doesn't necessarily stand alone, and you have to manage storage inside the cluster. No, you can leverage other storage resources, Azure resources that's native or very platform like PaaS oriented, right? Which is really beneficial. So that's what this slide is about. Here is just another view of how you have a VNet, multiple nodes, and then different pods, and then they can also work against different data resources within Azure. Okay. So really, it's very extendable. Like as you can see, there's Key Vault to manage secrets and keys. That can be used with Azure. Okay, along with Azure Active Directory. There's also container registry. So if you know something like Docker Hub, like you can have a container storing your Docker images, so that when you deploy, those Docker images are pulled from here and deployed into your cluster. So the takeaway from the slide is you don't have to uh, try to leverage storage within the AKS. You can leverage Azure resources, which is pretty neat. So here is another example of a microservices application. Okay. Um, um, having a front end, a back end. So each of these cubes is like a pod, okay, that would contain your Docker image. So basically in microservices, you can have your front end here, and then another like ordering microservice here, which talks to the database, or something that has let's say like a shopping basket, and you can scale up the pod kind of independently of the entire application. So that's what kind of this is saying, and that's what AKS environments can do. Okay, and again here you can leverage all these other services that Azure provides. So why? What's the value proposition of AKS? Well, it's really scalability, right? So you can scale out the number of pods or containers, right? Resiliency. So if a pod is noticed to go down, like due to some bug or something, it can just pull a new image from the registry and then spin that back up. Okay. One really cool thing about AKS is rolling updates. So when you have, let's say back to this slide, let's say you have two pods here, you can deploy to one pod, right? And then, and then, as you check that, if it verifies, then you can you can update the next one, right? So basically, it supports like no downtime, right? So when traffic comes in, this pod is being updated. All the traffic will go to the other pods, that is the older version, and then let's say the newer pod gets updated, then newer traffic will go into the newer pod. So that's a pretty unique thing I would think with Kubernetes. Okay. Some other benefits here: auto updates, the versioning. That's really easy. Um, the benefits of containerization, density, having many applications hosted from in a containerized model, whether versus like a VM. Okay. Any questions so far? If there's any I can answer, or you can ask me later. Okay. So what is orchestration? It's again scheduling on deploying what images go to which pod, affinity, so that any like traffic will kind of stick to its the pod that is serving that data. Okay, health monitoring, failover, scaling, as I talked about, and providing a network layer. Okay, service discovery, etc. Okay, so let me just let's see here. Enough talking. Let me just show you. Let's see here. What's the which one is which browser should I use? Was it this one? Oh no, not this one. Okay, bear with me here. Wait, this one. Okay, so let me just walk you through the creation of an AKS service. Okay.
Can you maximize the browser?
Oh, sorry. Do what?
Can you
Make
maximize the browser to be more visible?
bigger.
I mean, full screen the browser, full screen.
It is okay, like this.
Yes, yes.
Okay, got it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so okay, let's go to Kubernetes service. I have some already created, but let's just go through and add one. Okay, so first of all, if you understand, you need a subscription. Okay, and then I'm gonna stick it in this existing research group. Okay, let's give it a name. I'm gonna call it RKAKS 2. Okay, choose your region. Let's see here. And then these are the various versions. Okay. So right now the default is set as 1.148, the Kubernetes version, a DNS prefix. Okay. And then next is kind of the scale of it, right? So you can have virtual nodes. I kind of want this is more advanced topic. I'm not going to go into that. Okay, but it's not needed for a basic setup. VM scale sets. So if you want to do the whole point of this is if you want to do auto scaling, right? Or if you want to do Windows containers, you need to have this enabled. Okay. If you don't have VM scale sets, you're just deploying VMs kind of one by one, right? Like manually, right? When you want to scale out the number of nodes, right? So, so that's a whole purpose of scale sets is to do auto scaling. But I think it's easier to demonstrate. I'll just disable that. Let's see here. And let's see here, it's not showing the number of nodes, but I think the default number of nodes is 3. Authentication. So you need to create a service principal. So basically that AKS will run under. It's like a service account. So, for example, if AKS needs to work with, let's say, Key Vault or Azure Container Registry, it would run under that service principal and have the appropriate permissions to other resources. RBAC, definitely, I would recommend leaving this on. This provides role-based access to users and groups in a cluster. So you can say that within a Kubernetes namespace or pod, you can say that a certain set of users and groups have certain permissions like read, write, delete, access to certain resources within the cluster. Okay, networking. Let's see here. You can bind this to an existing network. Okay. Let's see here. So what I like to do is, okay, let's do an existing one. No, okay, let's just do a new one. Okay. So AKS definitely needs to be bound to a virtual network. Right here, it's gonna create one. Okay. Monitoring. Um, so, uh, so any kind of logs you can from AKS, you can spit it out. I'm just gonna let's see here, defaults, namespace. Yeah, we'll just create one there. Tags, ignore tags, review and create. Okay, let's see what we have here. What failed? Basics. Oh, the maximum node size. Okay. Due to remaining quota in the subscription. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I deployed many VMs in this subscription and it hit a soft limit, right? So it's not letting me do three nodes, okay, in the cluster. That's generally recommended, especially in production. But you know what? I can do one, okay, and that should be fine. Authentication. We'll just go through these ones. Okay, and then it's going to take some time to create. Any questions? No? Okay. So that's going to run for a while. Wait a minute, running. It's around. Okay, now I'm going to click create.
So for this thing to operate, someone, they don't need to understand or know anything about Kubernetes, right?
Yeah, exactly. So because it's partially managed, as you saw, kind of how I went through these settings. You know, it's easier than doing Kubernetes from scratch, like on top of a bunch of like virtual machines, right? You got to install it on each node, all that stuff, right? So it's much easier, right? That's the value that AKS provides.
And one more question: does it is it available in free tier, or you have to have the pay?
Oh, free tier. Yeah, I don't really I haven't really experimented in free tier. I don't really use it, but let me think. Probably, maybe, but it's not going to be free indefinitely. Like there are some services that are free indefinitely, but not. I don't think this one, right? Like for one thing, it's like just I would equate it to a virtual machine. So if a virtual machine is free, which I don't think it is in free tier, right? Then yeah, I don't think this is free, right? So.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. No, that's a good question. So here we can see kind of the deployment going. Okay, but let me just go back to the slides and okay, so that's orchestration. Okay, I'm not going to go through this, but basically the whole point is that there are other orchestrators, right? Azure Container Service, Azure Container Instances, Azure Web App for Containers, and Azure Service Fabric, right? So they all have their pros and cons, but it's a big discussion on which one to use. But I would say if you're Azure Container instances are really easy. So if you're a beginner and you just have, let's say, like a one container application, start off with Azure Container instances, right? Um, Same thing with Azure Web App. If it's a one container app, do that. But I think eventually, like I think Kubernetes is so like such a popular standard that you want to try to climb that learning curve and understand AKS. So that's what I would recommend. Okay, so tooling. We have Docker Engine, okay, that let you install on your dev machine, your laptop, um, and it includes the CLI, Docker Compose tools, right? So this helps build your applications into a Docker image, push it into a registry, and then upon deployment, we'll pull it from there, into the cluster. I use Visual Studio Code a lot. I'll talk about this in the demo. Azure CLI or
Yeah,
Azure
that's
PowerShell.
good.
But
And one quick question.
sure.
So when we build the container image and store in the repository, so it will be built as per whatever the storage billing, right? Like some kind of.
Yeah. So I can show that in a couple minutes. But yes, so if you're building deploying AKS, when you're selecting the virtual machine, it has some storage, the disk, right? Like the managed disk that comes with it. Is it a premium solid state drive? Is it a standard HDD, right? Which is much cheaper, right? So you have to consider the storage costs. Okay. kubectl, I'll show this in a bit. The Kubernetes dashboard. Helm is like a package manager to deploy into your Kubernetes cloud. I'll talk about that. And then using your standard kind of source control, Azure DevOps repos, GitHub repo, to store your application and your Kubernetes like YAML files, right, to help manage that, right? Pipelines, ARM templates. So yeah, so from my experiences, I find that there's so many tools that it's pretty challenging. You get to understand kind of the syntax for all the commands. So there's tools that make it easier, but you got to learn them, and they have their own way. So it's a lot. I find when you go into
Yeah.
Kubernetes, there's a lot of tools. So
Can you explain like what is Helm?
yeah, I'll show that in a bit.
Sure.
Yeah. It's like a package manager
Okay. Okay.
for Kubernetes, like npm. But hopefully I'll show that in a demo. So learning curve. Well, I'll just like for me, like the learning curve is steep. You know what I mean? It's really steep learning curve. So if you're interested in AKS, I would say like yeah, you can read a book or anything like that, but nothing is better than just doing it. So I would just follow some simple tutorials online, and you just do it. Like sometimes you don't know what the heck you're doing, you get all these errors, and then what I do is I just Google the error, like copy the error message, I Google it, and then I find like what the suggested solution or workaround is, and it gets fixed. And honestly, I don't know how it was fixed. You know what I mean? But but later on, as you develop more experience and you read more about Kubernetes, you kind of then you start to understand like, okay, how it was fixed and stuff. But I would say just do it. That's just for this thing. You're not gonna get up the curve unless you do it and learn. So here is like a deployment workflow. So actually, before we go here, I should maybe switch back to the demo. Deployment is underway. Okay, it's still going. Okay, but while that's going, let me just show kind of the tooling that I use. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So So here I use Visual Studio Code. Can you guys see? This is trying to make it bigger. Oh no. View, appearance. I thought the oh zoom out. Whoops. View. Let's see here. View, appearance, zoom in, control. Okay. Okay, there you go. Okay, hopefully you guys can see. So, okay, so I use Visual Studio Code to manage. So you develop things such as you know, these kind of like a YAML file right here. So in Kubernetes, you know, this is how you declaratively configure or deploy resources. Okay, here's another one. It deploys a Redis cache. So it gets an image, right, and then throws it into your AKS environment, right? Let's see here. So the one thing is when you use Visual Studio Code, I use the Kubernetes extension. So you go here, Kubernetes is this one right here. It's actually built by Microsoft. You can see it's got a ton of downloads, 386, right? So I'd say it works well. And the way it does is basically, you know, once you're in the command line, okay, see down here, once you're kind of logged in, you develop like a login session with Azure, right? Or with any Kubernetes cluster that's running kind of in your, even locally, it'll pick this up. So this one right here, RK AKS cluster is within Azure, okay? And then you can see things like namespaces, the nodes right here. So there's only one node, okay? And then it's showing kind of all the pods, okay? And you know, it's green, workloads, deployments, okay? Here's one with all the pods, okay? So I like this tool. It works out pretty nicely. So you know, it's nice and lightweight. So and then we can go to the Kubernetes dashboard. See here. So yeah, there we go. So I'll do that again. So you go right click on your cluster level and you go open dashboard. Okay. So once you open the dashboard, this application is actually running in your AKS cluster as a pod. Okay. So this is running inside your Kubernetes system. And then we can see that all the pods, so a pod is a unit of, is the lowest unit of a AKS resource, and that's where it contains your container, okay? So you can see that all these are running. If you go to services, let me see, let me try to click on this one. So what you just saw there, I'll go back. So services are basically kind of your service endpoints for end user to enter the application, right? So I have one here. It's a simple demo by IP address, and really this application right here, I can select cats, dogs. You know, I vote for cats or dogs, and the number goes up. It's multi-container. There's a front end and the back end. The back end is like is Redis cache, right? Just to store the these numbers 5 and 6. Let's see here. So if I go open this one, so I got another app here. I go more cats. I go to here. If I click on this, it updates. It gets the number. So it's 11. cat. So this is running in AKS, okay? And again, you're going through kind of the external endpoint through a service, so what you call a service, right? So that's what, what kind of AKS kind of looks like from a dashboard. Okay, so let's see here.
And quick question. So basically, you connected with the public IP. So how the networking works here? So basically, if I do AKS, so there are a bunch of
Mhm.
VMs, and so what networking driver do you use? Do you use the host driver or use some other like a bridge driver? Basically, I'm asking like how the container
Mhm.
uh, is mapped with the external IP. So do we have to create a firewall rule in Azure security groups or something, or it's like all automatic?
Yeah, well, okay, the short answer is kind of all automatic. Actually, it's very complicated, and it was very hard to get my head wrapped around it. Um, but let's see here. How should I answer that one? So, okay, maybe go back to my slides here. I think I have a networking slide. I don't mind jumping into it, right? So here, um, for the networking concepts, right? So, okay, here's one example, right? Like you have your 3 AKS nodes, okay? And what you have is a Azure load balancer, okay? And it goes through the load balancer, and it hits your AKS node. Um, let's see here, but it's more complicated than this, right? So there's something called the ingress controller.
It's completely all
Yeah,
right. I just want to, because this
yeah.
is what I understand. Like, okay, incoming traffic, okay, load balancer. Probably you have to configure the load balancer separately. It may not be done on.
Yeah, actually, the load balancer is pretty automatic,
Okay,
right? Yeah,
okay,
you don't really need to configure that.
okay, okay.
Um, yeah, it's a complicated topic, to be honest.
No,
But yeah, there's many kind of to get from incoming traffic to the actual pod. There's a lot of networking jumps. You know what I mean? To get there. So okay, so let me like answer it in two buckets, right? So I would say AKS has their own internal networking, and then you rely on the networking that is at the Azure VNet level. You know, so AKS has their own little networking system, and that's what makes it a bit like hard to grasp, but that's kind of how it is. Um, let's see here. Um, yeah. So okay, let me show you through the portal. Maybe I can illustrate a bit better. So let's see here. Okay, so that deployment is done. Okay, so we come here. We're in the okay. Maybe I make it bigger here. AKS. So we're in the AKS service. It's been deployed. Okay, and there's not much. Uh, there's not much configuration here. So in this agent pool, we have one Linux like VM running, okay? Um, and if you want to upgrade the version, you can do that pretty easily. Okay, you just select the version and then save, and they get upgraded, right? Scalability. So so this is where you can do it manually, like have 3 nodes, okay? Networking. Um, yeah, this is let's see here. So yeah, networking. mm, so I have a blog post. So I will, let's see here. I would suggest if you want to know what the networking options are, I have a blog post here that I have like a, what do you call it, 5 blog post series. Let's see here, part 1. So, so basically it goes through the various networking scenarios. Okay, um, and if you really want to get a good understanding of a basic understanding of networking options, I would say just read through that. You know, maybe I might do a webinar just focused on this, but just for the sake of this presentation, I'll just kind of keep it high level. Um, yeah, it depends on your requirements, but you don't see much here, but you can do quite a bit. Okay, so that's, as you can see here, it's very, there's not too much configuration, but let's see, if you go to properties, what happens is that, okay, right now what I just did, okay, I did it pretty quickly. I'm going to, so when you create an AKS resource, it creates like a, what do you call it, another resource group, okay? In that resource group will contain basically the supporting resources, okay, to support a AKS cluster, right? Um, this is an actual like a load balancer, okay, network interface. Here's the agent pool, which is the actual virtual machine that is in like, or that is the node, the one node, okay, and its network card and all those things. So if we look here in Kubernetes, it's already configured to point to that backend pool right here, okay, and then having front end IP set up, and along with, let's see here, load balancing rules. Yeah, none yet actually. So that's what you have with, let's see here, with when you create AKS, these are the resources that gets created. It's kind of hidden, but it's pretty useful. So if you're in a dev environment and you want to save on costs, you can just go ahead and click stop, okay, and that will save on your costs. Okay. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, one question like I have been suffered, many having unwanted Azure bills. So this thing, so I nowadays what I do, I basically simply delete the resource group. So is there any way to keeping the resource group? And so basically, if I keep it, you keep billing me, right? I have to delete the resource group as well, and the resource account and storage account. If I just want to have, like after I did some testing, and I don't want any bill after that, say, so I have to delete everything.
Yeah, you basically have to delete everything if you
Okay.
want to
Okay.
save on all the costs, right? So let's see here. Like for example, load balancer doesn't cost anything. I don't think so, right? But there is something called like a disk. Like even if you turn off the VMs, you're still paying for like the disks, right? So I'll give you a little tip here. We'll go to a disk here. Go to configuration. So I'm at the manage disk resource, right? You go configuration. So as you can see, it was by default premium SSD, solid state drive. That's pretty expensive, okay? So to save on costs, this is what, and I do this, is that first of all, you stop the VM. Like I can't select anything right now because the VM is running, of course, but you can select a cheaper HDD, right? Which is much cheaper.
Yeah, cheaper, yeah, hard drive,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's still gonna cost, even if you turn off the VM, it's still gonna cost you something, but a lot less. So that's the best thing to do. Like if you want to save on costs entirely, you have to delete the whole resource group. Yeah, make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, cool. So so let's go back to uh, here. Okay, let's just see if uh, I've so that new AKS environment is running. I just wanted to kind of show up here. Let's see here. Let's see, add existing cluster. Oh well. Yeah, usually, yeah, maybe I have to like close everything and all that for it to pick up. But in any case, after I create the AKS cluster, I would just refresh and then I would normally see that. But in any case, I haven't the existing one, okay? And so this is where I'm talking about kubectl, which is the command line to manage your Kubernetes cluster. So if I say kubectl get nodes, kubectl, it's not recognized. Oh, well, yeah, okay, whoops, I made a typo. Kubectl. So here we say to get nodes. Okay, there's only one node in this cluster. Okay, and then I can so kubectl get pods. Okay, and then we see here that there's these many pods running. Okay.
Uh,
Um, yep. Yes.
am I mute? Okay, yeah. So the command that you're running from Windows or you're running from Azure CLI?
No, I'm running it from Windows. So this kubectl is something you have to install, like in your dev machine.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yes.
then you know,
Okay, so
uh,
basically you give the IP of the Azure controller and it pulls from there. Okay.
yeah. Well, yeah, you don't have to give it IP. You just log in, and then you have to say, like here, set as current cluster. So you're in that context, right? You're in the context. You have a session. So there's no setting of IPs, but yeah, you have the right idea, right? And then you can
But
just
how do I log in using my Visual Studio Code to Azure services? So basically,
Oh, okay. So you go to Visual Studio Code, and then you just do AZ login.
oh,
Okay.
like that. Okay.
Yeah. And then again, like and then when you go to this, when you go clusters, um, in that when you log in, it'll pick up on all the AKS clusters that you've that you've created. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Including local ones in your local computer. Like this one is local, these two are local, right? Not in Azure, but yeah, for some reason it's not picking up here. Um, yeah. So okay. So any case, let's see here. Um, okay, I think we're kind of running out of time, but let me go through some of these slides. So back to this, right? So, um, as a developer, you use Docker to create an image, right? You build a Docker image, it goes into a registry, okay? And then next is you want to deploy that um, those images, into Kubernetes. So you do kubectl, you have a YAML file, right? And that will get submitted into the master node, right? Like the Kubernetes API server, right? This is the unmanaged portion, right? And then that scheduler in the master will take that instruction, find the appropriate nodes, and then deploy that, and then pulls those Docker images from the container, the registry, okay? And then you have your application kind of running, right? And then a consumer, that wants to access the application, you will use the browser, will go through kind of its own gateway, kind of behind the scenes, right? That will does a little bit of the internal networking in Kubernetes and then routes that appropriate traffic to your container, your pod. So that's the kind of the flow. Um, So, okay, I won't go through this, but let's see here. So, so in terms of DevOps, right? You have to consider kind of the roles, like developer versus like IT operations. You know what I mean? So developers, they like to, change things, hack at things, develop the application. Where the operations side, they care more about manageability and stability. So they must work together and find out like processes that will help them deliver working software in a continuous basis, right? So and AKS can fit into that mold. Okay. So let's see here. I think I'll skip this. It's kind of a heavy topic, like role-based access. But just look for it in the notes. Let's see here. So we talk about networking, ingress controller. So ingress controller is a very important concept. So that helps kind of route the request to the right pod. So it's sitting in usually inside the cluster, and yeah, it just points to the right pod and return that information. Okay, I'm not gonna go through. Skip that from. Okay, so basically, with AKS, okay, um, when you want to start out, right, you have to kind of figure out like what are your existing applications and can they be containerized? You know, for the most part, yes. Or or do you want to start net new, like building applications? Okay, and then you got to set up your lab environment, your proof of concept, migrate, develop your containerized applications, okay, and then you need to deploy them effectively, right? So keep that in mind. So okay, that takes us into the kind of Q&A. Anybody have questions or anything?
Anybody, please feel free, because you have a Microsoft MVP with you, and he's more than happy to answer your question. And it looks like nobody wants to have. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, that's
So,
fine.
Troy, and thank you so much
Yes.
for giving your valuable time for the community. And what I'll do is I'll the recording of this I'll post on YouTube and share with the link. And you can also share your blog post link so that I can post on the comment section. So anybody
Okay.
interested in subscribe to your blog, that would be great.
Okay, great. Okay,
Okay.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
okay, bye.
Bye.